This is The Point of View. We are live on City TV. On The Point of View, we select the right topics, get the right guests, ask the relevant questions, and at the end of the day, we glean some useful insights. My name is Duke Mentopoku, sitting in for your regular host, Bernard Koku Avle. Well, so it looks like the COVID-19 situation globally is gone past the 2 million mark in terms of cases. After a downward spiral in the country over the past few weeks, there's been a spike. The president actually announced on yesterday during his 22nd address that the new variant, which has been recorded in some parts of the world, actually we have some cases, not amongst the general population, but the travelers who are coming into the country, some of them brought that in. Amidst that, today schools all over the country, basic schools for that matter, reopened, and early on tertiary and second cycle institutions last week also reopened. We'll be looking at all of that, the ramifications for that decision, and where we are currently with the fight against COVID-19. We'll take a break here. When I come back, I'll introduce my guests and we'll delve into the issues. Stay with us. Welcome back. So today, I would say we had a full complement of all streams of the educational sector back in school almost close to a year, 9 months and some days after schools were closed by the president as a measure against the spread of COVID-19. Earlier, the whole country, earlier before that closure, there was, the lockdown, announcement of a partial lockdown across the country before that decision was also announced. But today, most schools were back in session, and my colleague Ni Aikwe Okai spoke to some parents and some students on how they're observing all the protocols after coming back to school for almost a year.
They have given every child one table, one chair with your name on it, and they are not coming on break. So when you come, you sit, you wash your hands, they take all the safety protocols, and when you sit, that is it. They will bring you your food and everything to the class. So the children are not coming on break, and then 3 p.m. parents comes in, and then they'll call the children from the class for you, and you pick your child and you go. For the KG like this, for me, I gave him his own pocket sanitizer, then I gave him 2 face masks, then I prepared his food, and everything is in his bag. So they are closing at 12. So the teacher will make sure that the snack is given to the child, and then there's vitamin C that they will give to the child at the snack time just to boost their immune system.
No more mismo no more. Kaja skunde ba mafoi fe fine kagen tono ke ba bekeba le ko la nje kombe ke no mo alo 6 oye oga shweshi yan le ni ona ke 4 di enwe ko ke ba ke ba shine nye shia do bu no smas e fo de po e abolishi ke ba ni ba shia ni ale ska ya ni ye na shi skunle awale ke ni bipi e biene na ba shia mu makwele.
Some of the students told City News how they intended to catch up with the lost contact hours.
I am excited.
Why are you excited?
Because when we were at the house, we couldn't learn. Some people couldn't go to classes because their parents are not having money. So we are excited for the school opening.
Okay. So now that schools are reopened and then there is also COVID, what are some of the things or protocols you are going to abide by to ensure that you do not get affected?
We should wear our nose masks every day, and when it is dirty, we must wash it and wash our hands when we do anything and use the sanitizers.
So as a student also, what are some of the things you are going to do personally to ensure that you catch up with the lost contact hours?
I'll make sure that I learn so that my parents can be happy for them paying the fees and I'm learning.
I feel good that I'm in school now.
And why?
Because you have stayed in the house too long, so we are not we don't get time to learn. So now we are back to school, we get time to learn, so I feel good.
Okay. But in terms of the COVID-19 safety protocols, we know we are not in normal times. We have the disease around. So how do you intend to ensure that you are safe?
If I'm coming to school, I wear my nose mask, I'll wash my hands frequently, I'll use sanitizer, and we distance ourselves.
Okay. Aside that, you are a student. You've missed out on some topics. How do you intend to make sure that you catch up with the topics that you've lost?
So when I go home, I'll revise my notes and I'll go through my books so that I'll be remembering the last 10.
So this was first parents and then students speaking to my colleague Ni Ayikwe Okain on the first full day of reopening, if I may. Then currently our numbers stand: active cases 1,924, confirmed cases overall 58,065, 351 new cases today, 352 deaths, and recoveries and discharge 55,789. Globally, there were over 50 million cases and over 2 million deaths. I indicated that was the number of cases earlier that had crossed 2 million, but it's the deaths globally crossing 2 million. I have in studio Dr. Justice Yankson. Dr. Justice Yankson is the General Secretary of the Ghana Medical Association. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you, my brother.
I'll also be joined virtually via Zoom by the President of the National Association of Graduate Teachers, NAGRAT. They are one of the, caregivers in some of the institutions, second cycle institutions, mainly, predominantly, that's where NAGRAT operates. So, Doc, how bad is the situation?
Well, let me put it this way. Just about 4 days back, the Ghana Medical Association had cause to issue a statement.
Yes.
And in that statement, we described the situation as alarming and dire. So I think in sum, that is where we are now. I mean, the reason for this is very simple. We are seeing a surge in the number of cases on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned, we've done 351 today. Our treatment centers, as confirmed by the President yesterday, are overstretched, especially when it comes to severe to critically ill patients. So anything from moderate upwards, we are in trouble. And as it stands now, as a country, our capacity in terms of the designated facilities for COVID care, if the numbers continue this way, and then we also look at the way and manner the patients are presenting now, i.e. presenting with very ill cases, then what it means is that even at this early stages where we are overstretched, the next couple of days to weeks, if the exponential rises continue, there is going to be a serious crisis for us.
Wow. So earlier in the day, I caught up with the President's representative at the Ministry of Information, the immediate past Minister of Information, to make sense of the televised address by the President yesterday, and especially interrogated what really went into the decision by the President to reopen schools today. So I've been joined by the President's representative at the Ministry of Information, Kojo Oponkoma. We'll be having a discussion about the reopening of schools. Actually started on the 9th of January with the reopening of schools for students at the tertiary institutions. All through last week, we saw pictures from our university campuses and other tertiary institutions. This week, today, we've seen, of course, from over the weekend, actually, we've seen students in senior high schools go back to school. Not all of them, and we've also seen students at the basic school level resume from Friday up until today. Kojo, some welcome.
Thank you.
Some say that, of course, this decision took some time before it was arrived at. At the time, we had not seen the spike in the cases as we are seeing now. In a period of 1 week per the President's speech, we've had 14 more people succumb to this. High-profile people, including National Security Coordinator Salim, has passed on. Are you convinced, as you said here, based on the new numbers that the committee has seen, the president has seen, that it was a good decision for schools, especially at the basic level, to reopen today?
So the President's task force came to a decision which was endorsed by the President to continue with the school reopening program that had been earlier announced. Because, number one, we have to generally, gradually find ways of living normally our lives, as it were, despite the fact that the virus is in the ecosystem.
Okay.
So, in spite of the numbers that you may see at a particular point in time, we will have to find a way of getting our lives back to normal while the virus remains in the ecosystem. To do that, number two, means that some activities must be generally reopened, but the protective etiquette or the preventive etiquette that go with them are the ones that we have to ensure are in place. There's already been a pilot of tertiary institutions, senior high school students, final year students who are writing examinations, and the pilot has proven that you can reopen schools if you ensure that the preventive etiquette is adhered to.
Okay.
It is within that context that the decision stands that let the schools reopen, but more importantly, let us ensure that the preventive etiquette is adhered to.
But we've at least seen today around the country that in the supply of PPEs, we're told that they're going to be sent to these schools as we speak today, as the rollout of this directive. That most schools, I went through town today, a lot of the school children will go into school without that. Some say it's better to miss a grade than your life.
So today being the first day, the exercise of collating how much of the logistics have actually arrived on ground continues. I think it's a bit early in the day, and in the coming days there'll be some more clarity as to how extensive the logistics distribution exercise has gone. But as we monitor, apart from the GES system, as we monitor the general conversation, it appears that you hear that for many students who are going to private schools, they are already going from home with at least one mask, while awaiting what the public sector is going to make available for their protection. It's when you come to the case of the public schools that the reports we are hearing through the media suggest that parents are saying, go to school and government will give you a mask. So it's early days. It doesn't appear to be totally true that nobody has anything. It appears to be the case that there is some amount of it in the system. And if the lessons we learn from the tertiary institutions and the senior high schools is anything to go by, initially starts a bit slow, but the key thing is to keep monitoring and ramping up where you may find gaps. And I understand that that is what the Ghana Education Service intends to do.
Some have said that even with the regulation of that of tertiary institutions, it's been a bit difficult. Over the weekend, there was a freshers jam at KNUST, total disregard for all the COVID protocols and the rest. And this is at a tertiary level where students are supposed to, be matured and, have some sort of, be able to control themselves and think with regards to how they conduct them. So that's at the tertiary level. When you look at kindergartens, nurseries, lower primary, there are people who have made that argument that these sections of the educational structure should be excluded. Your colleague in Parliament, Sam George, has decided that his kids are not going to school until further notice because they are in that category and is advocating that government should take that part out. Isn't that an argument worth government even looking into and buying or pursuing?
The counter to that argument, as was put forward by the technocrats, is that what you rather need to do is to engage the administrators of these schools, the teachers, the school aides, to ensure that A, they have more numbers in the classrooms, particularly at the lower education levels, and B, the attention to the kids with respect to the compliance with the preventive etiquette is upheld. And if today, following some of the reports that have come through, is anything to go by, many places where kids were sitting about two to a desk in some of the public institutions, some of the reports I've heard from the Western region, for example, suggest that they are being separated. In some cases, you find out that there's an extra tutor in the classroom to ensure that there's more attention to the preventive etiquette. The caveat is that if we do that which we ought to do, then these schools can open, academic work can resume, even at this time when the virus remains in the global ecosystem. Because there's no foretelling that 2 months or 3 months from now, the virus would have been eradicated from the global ecosystem. The onus is rather on us to ensure that we put in place a framework that allows our kids to go back to school while being protected.
Yesterday we found out again from the president's speech that the new variant is in the country, but globally, we heard there's variant UK, first one we heard about, another one Nigeria, South Africa, and even latest is Brazil. How much more do we know about this variant, and what can you tell us about it?
I think we have to be clear. The president has not said that the new variant is within the Ghanaian ecosystem.
Okay.
At least about 3 persons who tested positive when the genomic sequencing of their samples was done, they proved to be, I think, the Brazilian, the South African, and the UK variants, which are different from the original one. But these persons were not allowed into the general Ghanaian population. So technically speaking, it's not been let into the general Ghanaian population. These persons were then restricted and are being managed until such a time that we can be sure that they have been declared as recovered, after which they can enter the Ghanaian population. It is now that some more work is going on the positive samples that were recorded in the general population to determine whether or not at this stage there is any bit of these new variants already in the Ghanaian population. And I think it's early days here. The data we have today does not necessarily support that position.
There's a thinking that government let down its guard, the entire system, machinery let down its guard, right from campaigning, where it's been variously suggested that it's not the reason why. But of course, the president yesterday mentioned end of year parties and all sorts that has led to the spike. Let's come to testing. The argument is being made that even right now, it costs so much, apart from the cost at the airport, $150 to get in, even to test at some private facilities. It costs so much more. Now, even the test and the pricing is even pegged to timelines. If you want it in 24 hours, there's a cost. 48, 72, there's a cost to all of that. Isn't it about time government made testing free at all facilities?
So you are talking about 2, I think, categories of testing.
Yeah.
What you get in the public health system. And my understanding is that in the public health system, the state takes care of your testing and your treatment in the public health system.
Yeah.
But we have not closed our doors to a private complement to the public health system.
There's so much in terms of the time lag in the public system. I know someone who tested. It took sometimes to take 24, 48 hours to the person almost a week, and that person eventually tested positive. And imagine the person going around is positive. It took a person a week to find out from a government facility. Those who want to take away all of that, go to a public facility.
That's a different conversation.
That's almost 1,000 cedis to test them. That
is a different conversation. If we're talking about fixing some of the recent gaps that have come up in the public testing or even tracing system or even the private tracing system, that's a different argument. But I'm saying that there is a difference between the public testing regime that is available and its treatment associated with it, where the state bears a cost. But the private sector is also allowed to complement what government is doing, albeit under a licensing regime. Now, you know that generally for prices of goods and services in this country, government cannot be in the business of legislating prices for the private sector. Yeah. But I think the point needs to be made that this is not the time to unduly profiteer from the kind of interventions that are being rolled out. This is a time to ensure that if you're a private facility, you are complying with the standards and the requirements and that you are not unduly profiteering. What I think government needs to do, what the Ghana Health Service needs to do, is to ensure that there's efficiency in what they offer, so that unless persons have unduly strong reasons to resort to the private sector, that becomes the norm. And if we're able to do that, this conversation, I'm sure, will be well balanced.
Let's look at the vaccine. Is the country on course towards meeting its deadline of having it delivered in the country by first quarter? That's the deadline we're working on. I
think the first time I heard Dr. Patrick Umar-Boaji mention the first quarter was in response to a question at our press briefing. That give or take by the end of the first quarter, we should be, based on the Gavi and other protocols, getting the first batch of vaccines for Ghana. I've subsequently heard them mention that between the first quarter and the middle of the year. What has happened currently that I can speak to is that His Excellency the President, following yesterday's task force meeting, has instructed that this week the subcommittee working on the vaccine has to complete its entire vaccine plan, which includes who qualifies as priority, whether or not a private sector complement may be allowed, which of the vaccines to screen and license to be utilized in the country. And the expectation is that when they are done with the putting together of all of these angles, they will be able to roll out a full vaccine plan within the country. It's not just being done by the task force, but we've also brought on board persons from other knowledgeable institutions that have other interests, and also ensure that the public interest is protected. And we're expecting that hopefully within about a week they can complete their tidying up of the vaccine rollout plan, and the president can announce.
Which means we would have a clear idea after a week.
In about
when
a week,
we have the
they should be
in
done and should have submitted their plan for sign-off. Remember, for all of these interventions that are being rolled out, you need to do a lot of consultation, bring together the necessary people around the table, let them complete their proposals, those proposals be interrogated before you end up having a final decision. And we're expecting that in about a week, they can make some progress with that.
Okay. I don't have a wonderful family. Are your kids in school?
My kids are going to go back to school as school is being reopened.
They open today, are they?
My kids' school has not fully reopened, but they'll be going back when the school fully reopens for them to go back to school.
Thank you. So that was the President representative at the Ministry of Information, Kojo Opon Kruma. Let's go online now. Let me welcome Angel Kabonu, President of the National Association of Graduate Teachers, NAGRAT. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so it's been a few days, at least some of the students started reporting from Friday over the weekend up until now. What are the preliminary observations of your members, NAGRAT, across the country with the reopening of the schools amid COVID?
Well, at the time the decision was taken for students to go back to school, we were not privy to the upsurge situation that we are now privy to. The numbers as announced by the president yesterday was unavailable to us. We were not aware of the spike that we are informed now. So the situation is quite very disturbing, and we are in a state of apprehension. Again, whereas I will admit that some schools are receiving their PPEs, there are schools that are also yet to receive their PPEs. So that is the summary of the state that we find ourselves as of today that I'm talking to you.
But what is the level of consultation, that went into the decision, so that at least from your side, NAGRAT, as a teacher union, that has a role to play in the rollout of all of this. What level of consultation from your side went into this decision before it was taken?
No, well, that is what I'm saying, that at the time that consultation was going on and at the time that the decision was taken, that schools were going to reopen, the situation of the COVID-19 had not reached the alarming situation that we were informed it had reached. In fact, when you listen to numbers today, that the numbers are 200 per day, and that most of the facilities and the centers are getting full, and that very soon we may not have enough beds to be able to cater for patients and so on and so forth. As at the time the decision was being taken, this was not the state of affairs that we're privy to. Unfortunately, the situation has become a little bit more complicated and disturbing than it was at the time the consultation and discussions were going on. Let me also state that before the schools, the decision was taken for the schools to be reopened, then teacher unions were adequately consulted. We sat with the Ghana Education Service, we discussed the issues, but the situation as was available to us at that time is absolutely different from the situation that you and I have found ourselves today. Okay,
but looking at the differences in situation, would your advice be the same? Would it change? Has there been, let me say, for want of a better word, an amendment to your advice based on the figures that is available to us currently and the situation now?
Well, if the situation we find ourselves today was the situation we were in when we were discussing the reopening, definitely, our positions will be a bit different from what it is now. Let us also not forget that parents and children had become fatigued. Even teachers have become fatigued in staying at home. So there was a groundswell of desire by people to want to go to school. Let us not forget that underlining factor. And the groundswell of desire overwhelmed the specific situation of the disease. So we all, as a people, were very complacent. And where I disagree with the former information minister was to limit the misbehavior from the Christmas period. I will want to extend the misbehavior
to the campaign,
the height of the political season. You saw during the political season, the politicians led their people to misbehave in this country. They did not advise their people. In fact, the modus operandi of their campaign did not factor in safety protocols. That is where the situation began from, and not the Christmas period.
Now, let's before I actually come back to the studio. Before the reopening, you held a certain position as NAGRA that certain parts of the educational structure should be left out of this reopening. Do you still hold that view?
No, well, that I think that's I was misquoted then, because we did say that we recognize the volatile situation with regards to those in the lower level of education.
Yes.
But with the proper application of the protocols and the presence of additional teachers to the normal teachers, and even then the Ghana Education Service indicated that they were going to use some national service persons to augment the effort of the teachers, who should be able to control the students in the class. And let us also not forget that the stay in school hours of the children was also reduced. And then again, the schools were given the opportunity to be innovative and versatile in taking decision attuned to the realities of their school environment in such a manner that if you feel that your school environment is such that there are trees, there are canopies, you can move some students into that so that there will be proper ventilation and so on and so forth. The unions also recognize that we were in a crisis and that it calls for sacrifice by everybody for us to be able to give our children some level of education.
Okay, all right, Doug, briefly, thank you. We'll come back to you. But Doug, briefly, I'm sure the GMA was consulted, but looking at how different the situation is now, would GMA still give government the same advice? I asked the information, the president's representative at the information ministry that question, and he said some of those decisions had been made way earlier before this time. Now they were experiencing this spike.
Yes, I think we need to put the situation in context. Just like Angel said as well, some of these processes in terms of the decision making had started way before the end of even last year.
Yeah.
And the various discussions had gone on. The discussions were also in the context of what was actually going on the ground at the time.
Yeah.
So based on the statistics that were available, some of these decisions were taken. And I think the president in his 21st address actually gave everybody the go-ahead to begin, academic work. But as Angel said, within this particular moment, the two more or less have coincided. And like we stated in our press release 4 days back, we said clearly that, look, the president during the 21st update actually gave the go-ahead for this to happen. As at last week, some of the schools were already operating. The universities had gone, whether in full or in part. And over the weekend, some other schools were going, culminating in more or less everybody going back to school today.
Yeah.
So clearly, on both sides, the educational group had actually prepared themselves. The state itself had also given the go-ahead. And then we are also confronted with this at this last hour. So by and large, our position was that, look, Once the call has been made, preparations have started, academic work has started in some situation, two key things will have to happen. One is that the managers of these facilities, the school facilities I mean, so the owners, i.e. the private sector, the various managers or head teachers and administrative and academic staff will have to ensure that the protocols are strictly adhered to.
Okay.
You know, beyond the general protocol, some guidelines have also been issued to the educational facility specific. And then one key thing is that we should be in a position, or we should have a strategy in place that will be able to do what we call early detection of cases or suspected cases.
All right.
Isolation as well, and then management, inclusive of testing. Because if we go by history, just a couple of months back, when we reopened the schools, partially though for some category of students to go and write their exam, there were a few cases here and there. It was the ability of the system to pick them up early and manage them that more or less saved the situation.
Okay.
But now we are going, that was more like a sample size, like a pilot.
Yeah.
Now we are going to operate within a bigger space, i.e. the entire country, and all levels of the educational, groupings are in school. So clearly our ability to do early detection, isolation, testing, and treatment should be very, very high. If we fail in that, and there are any suspected cases that are left just to run in the system, we are going to have problems either in whole or in some parts of the educational sector, and that will not augur well for us. So basically what we all need to do is to keep an eye on what is happening at that sector, especially between now and the next, say, 2 weeks. Okay. Because if you look at the way the disease functions, there's the latent phase or the incubation phase and what have you. And if you are going to really see problems coming from just going back to school, the next 1 week to 2 as well, we'll begin to see a lot more of them.
Okay, so surely the next 2 weeks will be critical, but at this time we'll take a break. When I come back, we'll continue with the conversation, learning more about the reopening of schools amid COVID, the risks and the gains.
You've done the hard work, the analysis, the selection. It's all going according to plan. Until City miss a sitter, and you miss your multi-bet by one. Miss your multi-bet by one, and we will return up to 20 times your stake. We've got your back, even when City don't.
This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the Gaming Commission of Ghana. Bet responsibly, not for persons below 18 years.
Welcome back. This is The Point of View. We're discussing the ramifications of the decision to reopen schools today. That's Monday. And this edition, we're discussing what happened earlier in the day where we had most of, the students across all cycles of education in this country, first cycle, second cycle, tertiary institutions all in school now. Currently, because of the president's decision or government's decision to have education function normally amid COVID and its protocols and all of that. If I still have Angel, you mentioned earlier in your submission that some of the schools, at least at the second cycle level, senior high schools, there are parts of the schools or a group of the schools that have. Angel, are you there? Oh, okay. So, all right. While he gets settled, let me make up some of these challenges with technology, Doc. Doc, we learned yesterday. Of course, and you've also mentioned it that our hospitals, our health facilities, are getting overstretched, right? Per the estimation and per the figures that we have, how much more time can we go in terms of days and even weeks before this gets out of hand totally in terms of the numbers that we are recording? And of course, bringing in the students. Is that an outbreak in a school of at least 500 people? Are we in a position to handle that?
Let's put things in context. It'll be very difficult for anybody to tell you, how far we can go.
Okay.
Truth is that as of now, we are overstretched. The problem is because when it comes to moderate, severe, and critically ill, we don't have a lot of room.
Okay.
If it's about mild cases, we may be able to get, facilities around. But the specialized care that is needed for those who are severely ill and critically ill, like the ICU, the dialysis machines, and what have you, we don't have a lot of them. So when it comes to specialized care, at this point, we are stretched. And if we are talking about the number of days or weeks, it's so difficult to tell because a lot will depend on the presentation of cases. If, for example, tomorrow we wake up and of the 351 that we had today, even 100 of them are severely ill. What it means is that we are in trouble because we don't have that much capacity. And unfortunately, at this point, what we are observing clinically, or at the clinical end, is that the patients are presenting with a lot more of the severe forms of the disease.
Wow. Why is it? Because it takes a longer time? Because previously we heard that most of the cases were asymptomatic.
Yes.
Is the trend changing now?
Yes, clearly it is changing because we are also seeing a lot more youthful population being infected. We are seeing teenagers, people in their early 20s, what have you. Hitherto, it was more of people who are a bit more older, people with underlying health problems, what have you. You have patients who don't have any underlying health problems, very young, and are still severely ill.
Wow.
Yes, so it all depends on the presentation that we'll be getting at the hospitals. But like I said, the clue is that at this point, we are seeing a lot more people who are presenting with the severe forms of the disease. And that is where the problem actually is at this particular point.
But medically, do we have the capacity to, for instance, average senior high school in the country over 1,000? There's an outbreak in that senior high school.
I mean, look, our capacity to manage these cases, it's very, the capacity is limited. So if we are talking about serious outbreaks, which will end up being severe, we'll be in trouble. For mild cases, we can always get some places to isolate them and manage them, like we're doing at the Pentecost Center in Kaswa and what have you. Those ones are easy to manage. But those who need full-time, clinical attention, that is where the problem is. And unfortunately, as a country, we all know our store count of saving dialysis machines or, say, ICU equipment and ICUs, ventilators, all the things we can talk about. We don't also have a lot of human expertise that are specialized in those critical care areas, especially when it comes to doctors.
The number of ventilators in the country, we have an improvement in the numbers.
Well, you see, it's a bit dicey. Mind you, not all the numbers are for COVID. So some of the ventilators in the country are also reserved for non-COVID patients. The old problems that we all had before COVID still persist. So people will go for surgery, people will have other non-COVID respiratory diseases, but may require, ventilators, or what have you. So if we say we have, say, a certain number of ventilators, we should understand that not all of it is meant for COVID at this point.
So how many do we have?
In fact, as of now, I can't even give a figure.
Wow.
Because, yes, I'm being candid because,
we have increasing number of ICU cases, some of them which may require ventilators.
Oh, yes, that is the truth. When we talk about the severe and critically ill patients, a lot more of them require ICU care, things like ventilators, the use of oxygen and what have you. So that bit you cannot deny. But I'm saying I cannot give an accurate figure because in terms of the numbers, we had some support from some facilities that, as we speak now, are not doing core critical, COVID work. So it's difficult to tell how many of the the ICU's beds are strictly for COVID at this point. And you know what also happens is that when the exigencies of the time comes up such that we are fully stretched, we may be compelled to convert a lot more. But by and large, the nation's stock of ventilators that are in active use nationwide will not go past 100.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, let me come to Angel now. Angel, if you are there. Yes, Angel. So I can hear you. You spoke about the number of schools that have still not received PPEs. How widespread is this problem?
Well, it looks as if the distribution of the PPEs are in process.
Okay.
The schools that are in the urban and the peri-urban areas are doing relatively well as compared to the schools that are further afield and in the hinterland.
Okay.
So, and these distribution of materials are coming all the way from the regional secretariats of education. So, collections will have to be done by the various schools and so sometimes the reality of the geography of the area is also a factor,
terrain,
and so on and so forth. We hope and pray that we have adequate materials to go around, and that the materials will go around on timely basis. But let me also add that in as much as it behoves on government to provide some of these materials, parents should also take the initiative to ensure the safety of their children by also providing at least the face masks, and if they have it, the sanitizers, so that at least in the event that the child goes to school and they are now waiting for material from the regional secretariat of education, the children will not be too exposed.
But Per, what is on the ground, the structures in your school or in the various schools across the country, and as you've monitored, is there, you may not be the person to speak from a professional point of view medically, but are the schools ready to handle an outbreak for a school of say 500 to 1,000 students? 2 people, 3 students get infected by COVID.
That would be a very challenging situation. Let's admit something. This is not a disease that you approach or you handle by way of being brave.
Okay.
Especially when the disease is beginning to take, and on a lighter note, a country-specific nature. So we are beginning to see that there is the London strain, there is the Brazilian, then someone said today that like the Brazilian hair and the Peruvian hair, we are going to have the Ghanaian COVID. But that's on the lighter side.
Yeah.
What I want to say is that the nature of this disease is not even been explained to us adequately by Dr. Janssen and co, because it is a new disease and they themselves are still understanding the disease and so on and so forth. So in a situation of an outbreak, because some of the in-service training we were giving is that when there is an outbreak, because we are not professionals and because we are not trained, we should call the health professional. So you recall what happened at KNUST Senior High School, where the teachers were moving away from the student society, did not understand. Because the training we were giving was that because we were not professionals and because we may get ourselves infected and infect others, it is the health professional that we should resort to in the event of a COVID-19 suspected case. So if you have about 200 students suspected to be infected, what can about 40 teachers in the school do? That will become a very dicey situation as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so we'll take another break here. When I come back, I have your messages and we'll have the wrapping up contributions from my guests. Stay with us.
By law in Ghana, classes of vehicles have maximum speed limits which drivers should observe. The maximum speed loaded heavy goods vehicles should travel is 75 km per hour. In the case of buses, passenger carrying vehicles, or unloaded heavy goods vehicles, the maximum speed should be 80 km per hour. Saloon cars and light vehicles are not supposed to travel more than 100 km per hour. Agricultural vehicles should not travel more than 30 km per hour. In all cases, drivers should drive at a lower speed if the environmental conditions require the vehicle to be driven at a lower speed. Stop road crashes now. Stay alive.
This road safety education is brought to you by the National Road Safety Authority.
Welcome back. This is still the point of view. We're exploring the subject of the reopening of schools amid COVID. What are the risks? What are the gains to be made from this decision? And bringing some of your comments. Munkaila Jonas Edia from Kerry says, the effect of COVID-19 is gradually becoming very scary, but I think the solution is to take our destinies into our own hands by adhering to the protocols, because even if the president advocates for paying heed to the protocols and we become negligent, how do we get rid of the pandemic? Let's value our lives. Say for food is sweet. The saddest aspect is when you die of COVID-19, the burial even becomes terrible. Peter from Tema says the government thought the private schools were going to collapse, so they reopened schools so that they could take school fees and admission fees, then close schools again so the private schools can have some money. Well, that's your theory. Good evening. Says if the information minister is saying that they are now looking at how much PPEs have been distributed, I don't think he said that. Sally Suseche from Power in OT region says the fight against COVID-19 must be a collective fight. All citizens must join hands in the fight in order to save lives, especially their loved ones and family members. Dr. Kojo Yalad from Kintampo says, we all saw how people marched up on the campaign trail without any social distancing and even people with no mask. And now Kojo Oponkuma is telling us that political activities didn't contribute to the rising cases of COVID-19. Well, we heard Dr. Kumar say that the studies they conducted indicate that when you are in the open air, as in the cases or as what happened in most of the political rallies, that really is better. But it looks like Dr. Yankson is shaky. Dr. Yankson, you disagree with what Dr. Kumar said?
No, I think we need to put things in context. When we talk about case count, it is not limited to only active cases as we have today.
Yeah.
Yes, the active cases now may have been infections that may have occurred maybe not too long ago. But the truth is that the case count, the 58,000 plus that we have, from the time that the political activities were at its peak to the election day itself and right after the election day, we were still recording cases. So nobody can say that of all the things that happened, including these mass events that have been described as super spreader events, none of the 58,000 plus cases came from political activity.
But they're looking at the probabilities and the risks.
No.
Is it open air?
No, it's not about probabilities
compared to being
and the
in an enclosed area with air conditioners.
Nobody, if that is the case, then we'll all be walking on the streets without masks because it's an open area. That is not it at all. We are all supposed to enforce the protocols. Okay, we need to adhere to them. Look, of the 58,000 plus, we know politicians or political actors who had COVID and are part of this 58,000 plus. So when we are discussing these things, it should not be made to look as if it was just the last 2 days or the last 1 week that we got to 58,000. And one unfortunate thing is that, you see, society is structured such that people mirror what is happening out there, especially what leadership is showing. Now, during these political activities, the leadership of the country, both from the opposition and the minority, and the majority, the opposition and the ruling government, including independent candidates as well as members of parliament who were seeking to be re-elected. We all saw what happened. that did not demonstrate enough leadership. And people felt that, look, once our leaders are doing all these things and they are calling us, we are coming for the programs, nobody is showing us the way. It means what is happening is that the disease, in quotes, is not significant or is of no importance now. We threw all the preventive measures away. Of course, people haven't learned from you. Come Christmas, you don't expect that they will behave any differently. The truth is that the political activities contributed to the numbers, the 58,000 plus we have. So nobody should try to dissociate our case count
from the political
activity. They contributed.
All right.
Of course, the festivities have brought their own problems. We can look at it in that sense.
All right. Angel, what more can be done from the government, from managers of schools, from all stakeholders to ensure that at least we don't get outbreaks of COVID-19 in our senior high schools? Yes, at least that's your domain.
Yes, I mean, in all schools, I will say that let us continuously educate our children and educate ourselves. There was one statement you made that I want to correct, that we expect those in the universities to obey the rules more than senior high. You and I know.
You can find out much more responsible. That's the point I was making.
Yeah, we will be more responsible, but we disobey the rules in the university more than the senior high schools.
With responsibility comes, with freedom comes, certain sense of responsibility.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. But we will have to continuously educate our children and ensure that they keep to the rules.
Okay.
Teachers will now have to enforce the rules strictly. In those days when caning was there, we knew what we would do. This time we will talk to you and advise you as prescribed by the rules and ensure that you obey the rules. And if we all obey the rules and not misbehave and act irresponsibly like the politicians acted irresponsibly during the election period, I can assure you that the school's environment can rather be turned into a positive environment where there will be adherence to the rules and regulations and the protocols of COVID.
Great. Doc, let me come back to you. If you can box it up for me, the new variant and what we are calling post-COVID complications. What can you tell us about these?
Okay, so the new variant basically has arisen as a result of mutation.
Okay.
What we all know about viruses generally, even before coronavirus itself, the COVID-19, coronaviruses have been with us. Viruses generally at some point mutate. So the scientific community or the medical community were always looking out for any potential mutation. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on where you stand, as at this point, we have these mutations that have occurred. And that has brought about the new variant. The details is more technical, but the long-term effects or the key effects of these mutations are that, one, we are seeing that these new variants seem to spread faster than the old variants. They seem to attack the youthful population a lot more than the old variants. When it started, the talk was that older people were highly at risk, people with underlying health problems and what have you. As of now, with the new variant, it doesn't respect underlying health problems. It doesn't respect age. It attacks and it attacks you. What we are also seeing is that the clinical presentation from people infected with the new variants is such that you end up with a lot more moderate, severe, critically ill patients compared to the previous that gave you a chunk of asymptomatic patients or mild patients. But what we need to put in context is that this new variant, as we speak, yes, we have identified it in some travelers that came into the country. What is left is that the scientific community is now going to do or is doing the genome sequencing within the community to see the extent of spread or otherwise of this variant in our communities. If it turns out that it is pervasive, then we are in a bigger trouble.
Let's talk about the COVID, the post-COVID complications now. That you get you test positive a few days after you test negative, but still that's not it.
Yes,
there could still be other issues.
Yes, what the post-COVID situation is this: you have tested positive for COVID-19, whether mild, severe, or whatever. You've gone through treatment. In quote, you have recovered.
Yeah.
What we've seen is that there are residual problems or complications that are left behind for some people.
Wow.
And because COVID itself is a multi-organ disease, it affects all the organs in the body.
Wow.
Yes. So you could come up with problems relating to your lungs, which is the primary area. So for example, your part of your lung function is lost because there's been fibrosis of say 50% or 40% of your lungs. So the lungs full capacity, so if it's this container, you can only use say the upper part, the lower part is all gone.
Wow.
So you are going to have respiratory difficulties for more or less the rest of your life. If it affected say the kidneys, you were put on dialysis, but in some situations you become somebody who is going to be dependent on dialysis. It is not everybody who has acute kidney shutdown who is dialyzed will progress into the use of dialysis going forward, as in become chronic. But some people become, so that is also another problem. You may have other problems relating to, say, your heart, where the heart has been affected. At the end of the day, we realize that, yes, the COVID is gone, but you have residual cardiac problems that needs to be attended to. Issues relating to the brain, for example, may result in situations where you may have some neurological deficits or neurological problems.
Wow.
And these are things that we are grappling with. At Ghana East Municipal Hospital, post-COVID care clinics have started. And we are seeing patients who are coming in with problems. So COVID is not just the acute phase only. Post the acute phase or post your recovery, there is a need for you to seek further or continuous medical care for some of these things to be resolved as well.
Okay, so I thank you very much, Angel Kabonu. If you have any parting comments, we would hear them now.
Well, all that I would like to say is that let us be flexible in the decisions that we take. If we see the situation where the disease begins to escalate in the institutions, let us not be intransigent in the decisions and say that when we change the position, it is going to affect the image of government. I was thinking that if before this time we were not privy to the rise in the numbers, if we immediately see that, no, the situation is changed, it should affect government policy going forward. That is what I mean by being flexible. Okay. There is no need to take a hard position or intransigent position with regards to these diseases, this disease.
All right. Thank you very much. Angel Kabonu is the president of the National Association of Graduate Teachers. I also are the General Secretary of the Ghana Medical Association, Dr. Justice Yankson. My name is Duke Mensopoku. I sat in for your regular host, Bernard Koku Avle. Keep watching CCTV for the very best in programming.